pretty impressive. So Rob, thank you. I appreciate it. And I'll throw it over to you. And I believe the gatekeeper will let you share your screen when appropriate. Take it away.
Well, thank you. And it's glad to see so many Six Land folks. In fact, I'm recruiting you now to join our group. I have two guys from California now who come out. So there's always room for more. So don't feel that you can't join us. So should I share my screen now? Can I do that? Or?
Yes, go right ahead.
Let's see if this works, by the way.
Should be able to.
It's always scary when you do these things. How's that? Does that work?
That works.
Pretty scary. All right.
Yeah.
All
Amazing
right.
Technology.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm glad to be there. I mean, I'd rather be there in person, but this works just as well, I suppose. Welcome to you guys. That's a picture of me working the Shamrock Shuffle, which we're about to start actually this year. And we'll talk more about that in a minute, but that's our big spring event. The Chicago Marathon is the second largest marathon in the world by the numbers of people that participate in it. And the big five are New York, Chicago, Paris, London, and Berlin. And so ham radio is right in the middle of that action. In fact, as you look at most of these marathons, ham radio has a big function in all of them. I didn't know that at the time. And this project, what I'm going to talk about, is something that sort of evolved over the course of my time of being a ham radio guy. I always wanted to do some public service with ham radio. And I poked around in lots of different places, the Red Cross, Salvation Army, FEMA, all these kind of groups. And I wasn't ever looking for an event kind of like this, but suddenly it showed up and here I am. We play a very pivotal role in this world-class event. And I'm proud to say that, you know, I'm proud of what we've done and the number of people that we've gotten involved with it. And we'll talk a little about how we get all those folks as we go into this. So this is a snap of what it looks like on a normal marathon day. This is like downtown Chicago, right by the river. 45,000 runners at its maximum. That's what they did about 2 years ago. Of course, COVID has completely changed all that. So we're kind of building back up to that level again. And this is an old course map because I was too lazy to put the newest one on to make a JPEG. But basically, the thing that's cool about it, it's a flat course, and it goes all the way from the north side up to about Wrigley Field up north, all the way down to the south, down where the Sox play, at whatever the field is called now, like Guaranteed Rate Field or some crazy thing. And one of the things that makes Chicago kind of an attractive race is that, well, it's got an old, long tradition. It's been around since -- so we're starting our 44th year. But it's a very flat course, which for a lot of these things like Boston is much more challenging. But this one is attractive to a lot of runners because it's flat and it's a fast course. And as a result, we have 5 world records we can boast. The other thing is that it's a closed loop, which is a big feature for runners who you know, want to start and stop at the same place. I'll talk a little later on about benchmarking other events, but other events where they have a start line at a different place than the finish line present all kinds of new other challenges. The other thing about Chicago that's unique is that it attracts about 20% new runners, people who've never done a marathon before. So these aren't veterans like Boston where you got to qualify to get in. These are folks that basically want to just try it out. Now that presents a challenge to us in the sense to us and the medical team, but we'll talk about that a little later on. The other feature about the race is that it really does work to get to 26 different neighborhoods throughout Chicago. So you really get a tour of Chicago in the course of it. So that has made it a world-class event. It's brought people from 200 and some countries that have participated in it. And it's one of the features about the race that makes it fun. So how did ham radio get here? There's some guys there setting up. That's kind of an interesting story. And a lot of the events that I've been involved with the Red Cross and the marathon, they start with kind of a depressing story. Oftentimes I come into a place and I'll say, you know, how can ham radio help you? And I find out that we threw ham radio out. Ham radio in the early days provided a service, but then we became kind of arrogant about the service we provided and decided that we were going to be the only guys in town who could do what we did. And so one by one, a lot of these organizations threw us out. So I came into the Red Cross, and I was told that we don't want ham radio people here anymore because the last group that was here took all their gear and went home. Well, lo and behold, the same sort of thing happened with the marathon. There was kind of a falling out, and there was no ham radio part of the current marathon, the last more recent version of it. So what did it take to bring us back in? Oh, this is kind of a crazy slide here. I don't know. We'll see how this works. Basically, in 2007, there was a very, very bad heat wave in October. And if you're a runner, you know that running in the heat can be very treacherous. It was the high 90s, high humidity, very unusual for October for us here in Chicago. And the marathon was tipping on the edge of complete disaster. I mean, they had people who were falling. They couldn't keep up with the flow of patients. They had one cardiac event. They had a lot of problems. They had ambulances that were here from out of town. They couldn't find hospitals. And they decided to stop the race. And they didn't have, it turns out, a good way of knowing how to stop the race. But they stopped it. They declared it over. And so they had all these people disgruntled running around the town. I don't know if you've ever dealt with a marathon runner, but these guys are pretty extremely focused folks. They've been training for all year to do this run, and you're not going to tell them that they're not going to run it. So that was sort of some of the elements that caused the chaos that ensued after they shut it down. And once they finally cleared out the streets and got everybody home and started thinking about what the heck happened here, they did a real postmortem to think about what the heck can we do better to regroup. And one of the things I've loved about this particular group is that these guys really work very hard every year to improve on the year before. And they test us to do the same things. So a couple of the innovations that came out of that disaster was they decided that they needed to have a way to present a visual of when a race changes, when it stops, when it starts, what condition it is. They came up with an emergency or event alert system, which was basically flags. And then they decided to have DJs at each one of the rest stations so they could make announcements that people could hear. DJ. And the other feature was to work on better command and control measures throughout the course so they could figure out where there could be diversion routes, where they could stop things. Because if you stop the race at one point, you're going to have a flow of 25 or 50,000 people still coming through. So you've got to figure out a way to pretty much hold people in place so you don't have this collision of bodies when you come to a certain point. And then they decided they would invite ham radio. So they invited myself and two other guys to come and talk about how ham radio could be a part of this. And I was totally overwhelmed. In fact, I wasn't terribly certain that we could do anything because this was now in August and the race was in October, and we had to come up with about 100 people in a very short period of time. And I didn't even know if we had any repeaters that would work for this whole thing, but we charged on anyway, as you know, I guess the good old Midwest spirit said, yeah, well, we'll try it. We'll see what happens. It took a lot of work, but we built the foundation for the event that first week, those first couple of weeks, that really remains with us till now. And one of the big questions that came up is, where do we fit in? Because, you know, it's a commercial event. We're not really supposed to support a commercial event. At least that's what the FCC says. But as we kicked it around and thought about where our best place was, it became clear that we should be part of the medical team. That's a good fit for us because we're really dealing with health and welfare traffic. A lot of other events were getting a lot of heat for being involved with all the operations of the event, Boston included. And so there was a lot of purging of ham radio from some of these events because they were doing much more than they should have. So I had this thing about ham radio and large community events, a couple of bywords here. You know, not all these events are suitable for ham radio to support. I think you really need to do some soul searching about where do we fit in and what's the best place. I said here before, health and welfare is one of the best arguments, I think, for doing that. But one of the things that's fun about this event, it's a live event. It's in real time. It has an end time. You're going to be out of there at 4 p.m. It's not like a disaster where you may be there for weeks or who knows how long. And that's one of the attractions to it, I think. It's typically not a huge technical challenge, but it can be. It's really, as you pointed out at the beginning, really a manpower problem. How do you get people to do this? And one of the things that I think is key, and one of the things that's certainly key to our success, is that the scale of this is much more than any single club could possibly handle. So for instance, this is just the south end of Grant Park, and all those little white tents are just some of the tents that were set up for the marathon, just to give you some sense of scale. These are all, this is the village for all the people who are running charity events. And the hospital, just to give you an idea of what that looks like, that's a hospital set up on one of the streets that's 300 feet long or so. That's one of 2 hospitals like that that they use for the marathon. So that's pretty big scale, I would say. That's what it looks like inside without people. All these pictures I had to take without too many people inside, because it would be inappropriate. So the way we got started was we started benchmarking other events, and we looked at how other people did it. So I went to the Marine Corps Marathon in Virginia and fished around to figure out how they set up their event. They had a completely different model than what we were thinking about doing. We looked at Minneapolis and how they did it. We looked at Boston and how they did it. And we found that really each one of them had unique characteristics. Each one had different challenges that were unique to them. And there wasn't an awful lot of carryover, although we could learn a lot about how each one of these groups did it. But we found in the end, we had to kind of beat our way through it on our own terms. The one thing that we learned from the Marine Corps Marathon is perhaps the only thing that's different is the start guns. That's their start gun.
Okay.
They do things big there.
Don't stand in front of it.
So, one of the big things is to find what our role is. And then once you start doing this, then you can start figuring out how to attract people into these things. What you're looking at here is one of the aid stations. We serve the medical team. There are 21 of these stations along the course. We have them about every mile and a half. They're all outfitted in the same ways. They all have the same sort of people, staff, and materials like a wheelchair, tables, that whole 9 yards. We serve 2,000 of these folks that are involved with this event. So there's 20 in these small stations like this one. And then there's a mid-course medical tent that's really a hub for bringing people in and doing triage. And then they're dispersed to a hospital, or they're sent back to one of our finish line hospitals. There are 2 tent hospitals like the one I just showed you for Balboa and Jackson. And then we have about, I don't know exactly the number, but we have deployed teams in Grant Park, which work the finish line, because that's where they found the last mile is where they found the most likely places where they may have a cardiac event. So we have stacked up a lot of people in the last mile and in Grant Park, where hams work alongside with medical teams, roving around looking for people who are distressed and might need some help. The thing that we've run up against, this wasn't the case early on, but it's become more so today, is that there are fewer and fewer people who are involved with this event who are trained to do this job. A lot of people haven't taken any of the public service courses. They've gotten out of that. They've found other places in the hobby that they'd rather be involved. And so for instance, just like the Shamrock Shuffle, almost a quarter, maybe more than that one, a third of our roster are new hams, people who've never done any public service work at all, but want to be part of the event. They want to do something. They just don't know what they can do. And so a lot of what I'll share with you tonight are some of the things we've had to do to kind of bring some of those folks along. But for many, this is their first public service experience at all. And the first time they've used public service, used radios for public service. So we need to find a soft entry for those folks so they can find a way to get in and feel successful. They all don't come dressed like this gentleman is here, who's really prepared to be one of our roving operators. That's a pretty sophisticated set of equipment that he's carrying on his back. But you don't find a lot of guys come with that. They come with Baofeng radios and hope that they can actually produce something. This is where Zoom training, and actually COVID has helped out quite a bit. We've done a lot of work with Zoom to produce little training modules that we try to get these guys to kind of feel comfortable about it. Basically, as you go through this deck here, there's We try to admit there's quite a bit to learn, but we have to break it down into smaller pieces. A lot of them don't even have a radio yet, so we often provide radios for that. And then you got to think about supplemental gear like the gentleman you just saw there. People don't often think about how important it is to have the right clothes for the assignment. I'll show you a shot here in a minute, what the Shamrock can be even this time of year. And to encourage people to take the ARRL FEMA courses. But we encourage them to ask questions and ask more questions. And the key thing is we always try to align our newest volunteers with our seasoned, older resources, our experienced teams. So we always have 2 or 3 really good guys who are in the key positions at all these aid stations. And then we have the younger folks learning the system. And that model has worked out pretty well as we've gone through the years. One of the hardest things that hams have to learn how to do is to talk. I know that sounds weird, right? But the fact is the hams talk too much. And so our biggest problem is to teach them how to say as much as you can with as much brevity as you can, so you can get your communications done more quickly. And so one of the things that we've been really pounding on the last couple of years is to figure out a way to compress your conversation so that it's an efficient piece of traffic and not just rag chewing. That's probably the biggest feature, the hardest thing to teach ham radio guys, because they like to get on the radio and just, chit chat. So I found this piece of traffic that came from the Boston Marathon a couple of years ago, and we've been using this. I'm going to play it for you just so you get an idea. We're trying to teach the idea of the concept of, hey, you, it's me, first of all. How do you address somebody? The other thing is, how do you pass traffic so that it's done quickly and efficiently? And it seemed like the best way to do it is have someone else model it. So that's what this little chunk of video or audio does.
Fox 15. Foxtrot 15 net. Requesting transport for elite runner. Over. Fox 15, got it. And it's elite. Is the bib? Roger, sorry, male. All right, very good. I'll put in your Fox 15. I'll put in your elite transport request right now. Thank you, and 1 BDA. Control, this is Foxtrot 12 Alpha. Foxtrot 12 Alpha, net control, go ahead. Net control, I'm moving with our weight team right now to check on a runner on the starting course. Thank you very much. This is Whiskey 1, Mike, net control, 2012 Boston Marathon. Fox 18 Alpha. Fox 18 Alpha, net control. We are back on station. We had a runner go out on the ambulance, Boston EMS at 2:13. Okay, the runner, you said you had a runner picked up by EMS. Was this runner? Correct. Runner was taken in the ambulance by Boston EMS.
Well, so to unpack that a little bit, you see that there's an address to someone like, hey, you, it's me. This is a station, tactical with their tactical call signs, where they are and who they're trying to address. They're trying to get a hold of net control. And then they pass their traffic, whatever it is. Very small, a small part of what the bigger message could have been, I guess. And then the net control station repeats it. And so you can tell that the communication link has happened. You've got a coherent piece of traffic that's been passed. And then they end it with their call sign. So that little chunk of audio there really helps a lot to define the kind of aspiration that we'd like to find ourselves moving towards. And we were lucky with us because we've gotten a couple of net control guys who were air traffic controllers. And if you ever watch how they communicate, and they drive the show here, it's a remarkable thing to watch when it gets working. It's kind of like watching a contest when you're working a contest like field day or something, and you get traffic flowing really well. It's pretty amazing how much you can carry on. And so really getting people to think about how to communicate in a style that works for a public service event really for ham radio is what we spend some time talking about to get these new guys kind of up to speed. Just the other part of the story is to not only know your gear and how it works and perhaps how to what's communication techniques to use. It's how to know who you're working with. This is a picture of our forward command tent, not as it is now. It's sort of a couple of years back. We're not really allowed to show it, but we are behind the camera. So my camera is, looking forward. So behind me is where the ham radio guys are sitting. But in this particular place, these are all folks that are communicating with people on the course. Behind the black wall there are all the EMS, police, fire, and other officials, government officials. And then on the left side typically are some other support services. And we're all in this big tent. This is where we do all of our work. We have tried very hard because my work with the Red Cross and other places taught me that I think that we have to aspire to a customer service culture. We're here to provide a service to somebody, not to us. And it's like you leave your ego at the door and you do what you needed to do and do it with a smile. So I've worked very hard to try to create this customer service culture here. And I think that's sort of helped out. The other thing is just knowing your client and what their expectations are. What do they want from us and how can we help them? And a couple of years ago, there was a lot of anxiety around a FEMA study that was done at our event by the government to see how well Chicago as a group did intercommunications with all their departments. So they had people embedded in the forward command tent, literally sitting with us the entire time. We had 4 guys that were embedded with us, and then they had people all over the place that were watching and listening and taking notes on this event. And then they produced a report that, I guess was rather critical to the city because they wanted to get good marks. But we got really high marks for the work that we did, and was sort of proud of that study because it really kind of affirmed that what we were doing was the right thing, I guess. And the other thing is that we serve multiple agencies. So we're not only serving the organizers of the events, that's it's LaSalle Bank, or now it's Bank of America, but we're also serving the city of Chicago. We're serving all the city services. We're shooting, and there's also ambulance and the medical teams. So there's several agencies that we're involved with. Sorry, my foot's falling asleep. I got to get up or something. This is a typical medical team at each one of the aid stations. You'll see that they have 20 to 30 people sometimes at these aid stations. They all wear bibs that define who they are. If you look over some of these, you'll see there's a MD in there. You'll see a psych person. I think that's interesting. That's been a kind of a feature that's come up in the last couple of years. We've been introducing psychologists to the medical team. And have used them. I mean, there have been times when we would radio ahead saying there's a runner that should really stop running. And they couldn't get them to stop at the last station, and they would pull them off at the next one and try to convince them to stop because they were destroying their legs or their bodies or whatever. You'll see that there are nurses in this group here. You'll see that there are medical technicians that help with some of the data entry. Massage therapist. So that's basically the team that we interface with. And the person we speak with the most is the medical doctor who runs that particular department. As I was showing earlier, this is a pretty good layout of our station of a course medical tent. So the white tent that's got sides on it is really the medical tent. Behind it is really the ham shack where our ham guys hang out. You'll see there's an ice station there, an ambulance down the street. That's pretty much the setup for every one of the 21 stations. This is, in this particular case, this is the ham station. They have a canopy that I think they provided. And then they brought a little side shield to keep the wind down. But we're pretty much out there in the elements most of the time. Our ham teams vary in size depending on where they are in the course. So early stations like 1 through 5, we typically only have 2 or 5 people in that. We have 2 people that man a base station like this one you're seeing here. And then the others are rovers. So they're doing other things like talking to the medical team in the tent or they may be outside on the course looking for people that may be distressed and need to be pulled in. As you get further into the course, we deploy more people so that by the time you get to the final course stations, that's 16 through 20, we may have 8 people or more at each one of those stations. And part of the reason is that we start very early in the morning. And so by the time you get to that part of the course, you're going to be pretty dang tired. So that usually happens, the end of the race typically happens about 3 in the afternoon. So you're starting at 4, let's say. That's a long time to keep people standing around. And then we have a bunch of folks that work as rovers at Grant Park. They are basically work side by side with a medical person, and they literally run from patient to patient and assess their condition. And if it needs to be escalated, like if we need an ambulance or somebody from the ambulance or the ambulance company, they will then use the radios to try to find each other. And then we have, as I mentioned before, the last mile. We try to put about 50 or 60 people in the last mile. That's medical people and then hams that are split between them. That's something that we found at the one of the features of the Marine Corps Marathon is they have a medic and a ham side by side, and they had them very frequently, a couple blocks, had a lot of them. There are 200 hams that work the marathon, the Marine Corps Marathon. And so we have 140, but they deploy their people right on the course. And but we work primarily around these hubs, around these aid stations, or what we call them now, medical tents. So our responsibility, or the responsibility of the operators, is to know how you use your radio, to be prepared for anything, follow your lead. Each one has a lead that they have to work with. We try to encourage them to be a team player, of course. I can't tell you how many people show up with their radios not programmed. It's sort of aggravating. We have a guidebook, a massive guidebook that we've written over the years that nobody reads. So we've had to find other ways to train people. That's all right. And then, as I mentioned before, we try to get people to start thinking about how to speak in short, concise sentences. So think before you speak. Don't kick the mic on and then start blabbing away, because that's you're going to hold up traffic that might be important, like maybe somebody needs an ambulance. One of the things I mentioned earlier was that they came up with this emergency alert system, and this is a yellow flag. That's one of our responsibilities, is to deploy these at each one of the aid stations. So as the course conditions change, we deploy them and then report that they've been deployed. So that's a big feature. And these go all the way from low to red and then black if we have to stop the course to stop the race. Our band strategy is pretty interesting. This was founded pretty much from the beginning. We've done it this way, but we've also added a couple of features to it. But basically, it boils down to 2 different nets. We have a medical net, which is really primarily for medical communications, serious ambulance dispatches and that sort of thing. And then we have a logistics net. So for the medical net, we call Med A, we have a VHF and a UHF repeater that works course wide. And these are things that we discovered early on, that what assets we had to work with. We found that we have 2 repeaters that belong to other radio clubs that we could rely on to give us communication throughout the whole course. So we put those in as for medical emergencies or for QST messages to the whole group. We use those, and that's why we ask every tent to have a medical person who monitors the med channels, the VHF channel, and then we have another person who just handles the logistics net at each tent. Now, the logistics tent has 5 repeaters that we use, and that breaks our teams up into smaller units. And so that's a whole another discussion, basically. But we have 5 repeaters that we use for the logistics net. For the finish line, we've got 3 deployed repeaters that we put together, and those are put into places within the course that make sense and give us some coverage. With Chicago having all these tall buildings, you can't have a repeater just not a high. You can't get a repeater high enough to get to all these little crevices. So sometimes putting repeaters in strategic places helps us, better get into where we need to go. Plus, some of these repeaters, like this one repeater that we use, that VHF repeater, reaches all the way out to Rockford, which is, I don't know, 90 miles away. Somehow it's a long ways. And so you don't want the whole world to know what the heck you're doing, but we're sort of broadcasting what we're doing there. So we're finding that we're better off with smaller, lower powered repeaters that basically we have some control over and that others don't know about, so we don't attract so many flies. We've had trouble in the past with some intruders. And so we're moving to a different strategy as we go through it to go to these more deployed repeaters. We've started using DMR at the finish line, partly for that same reason, because you know, not everybody has a Bofang DMR. You know, there is such a thing. But you know, the problem is everybody's got an FM radio, so DMR kind of cuts the herd a little bit. And then we've experimented with things like mesh networks and D-Star for data, and the mesh network has never really quite worked out like we thought. And D-Star we just haven't deployed, primarily because there aren't enough people that have those kind of radios. So as we think about designing this event, you got to think about the lowest common denominator. Almost everybody's got an FM radio, analog FM radio, and you have to expect people to bring their own radios in. So that's how we did it. We're still relying on a ham network. The Boston Marathon, apparently, after the last event they had, we'll talk about that in a second or so, but they've gone to a commercial network. And so that's always the fear, is they're going to say, we don't need you. We might need your resources, I mean, like your bodies, but we're not going to use your network. So I'm proud of the fact that we provide an alternate network to their commercial network. They do use commercial radios. We're not the only people with radios, but we do provide a backup. And I think that provides a unique feature to this particular event. So we have two kinds of communication. We have medical net communication, which, as you can imagine, is really basically what it is. If you have an emergency, a cardio event, a need for someone to move, transport a person, they need an ambulance, that's what you call on that channel for. And then, you know, we provide the bib number, the condition, and where they're headed off to. Sometimes we've had medical advice, or the top doc, we report to the top doc for this event, the guy who's in charge of the medical team. And sometimes a doctor will ask for advice from him, and we'll put them on the radio. What they learned early on, which is the reason they brought ham radio in here at all, is a lot of doctors, for some reason, don't want to use radios. They'd rather handle patients. So so that's where we have a nice fit, because that's what we want. We don't want to handle, we don't want to work with patients. We want to help people communicate. So that works out pretty good. That's kind of a fuzzy picture, but this is in the early days. But these two young ladies are dispatchers from the ambulance company that sit right alongside us. And so when we have a call for an ambulance, we can literally hand them the information, and they can call right out to their dispatch center and get an ambulance sent that way. Most of the ambulances are pre-deployed. They're already at all the aid stations, but once the race gets going, those ambulances start running around. Then it's a much more of a challenge to make sure that we can get somebody there in a hurry. And then the backstop for that is, of course, the city system. If the ambulance company, in this case Superior, can't handle it, then the city of Chicago will come in and take over. This is another shot of our forward command tent. A couple of our guys, each one of these guys runs a different net, and we're all in the same tent together, so we can talk to each other if we need to. With course, in COVID days now, everybody has to wear a mask. We're still working that issue through. I think I still have to wear a mask for this Shamrock coming up, which is a real pain. We have to put the mic underneath the nose to talk. Yeah, whatever. So the other part, so you have medical communication that is literally truly a medical distress situation, and then we have logistics, and the logistics communication are what you'd expect. We came up with a system, and I'll talk about it in a bit more in a second, this idea of pace and stress, which was a way for us to communicate how the course is handling their load, and we'll come back to that in a minute. But we're also there to report unusual circumstances, things that might be going on in the course, weather conditions that might be changing. We have 3 weather stations on the course to provide information back to forward command. And we have a ham radio guy who is a weather person, and he basically provides customized weather reports. So we're feeding that into him. And then we help facilitate course changes. Like one year there was Shamrock Shuffle. And just before the event was about to start, there was a gentleman who was trying to commit suicide off one of the bridges into the river. And all of a sudden, we had to change the route. And that meant like city had to pull cars and start towing cars out. You know, stanchions had to be moved, people had to be moved. So within really 10 minutes, a lot of things happened that changed the route around that disaster. No one even knew that it was happening. But you know, well, we did, but no one in the public really knew what was going on, and we were able to make some adjustments. We always prepare for the eventual case where a fire might happen on course and we've got to make adjustments or other things. I mean, you never know. A big part of our work in this group is pushing medical supplies out. The marathon has gotten very good at pre-deploying what they need at the various places, but still, as the race goes on, depending on how the conditions are, medical supplies need to be sent back out. You know, if it's really hot, for instance, that's a one pile of different kind of material that's got to get out. If it's cold, then we need to send out things that can help people stay warm. And as I mentioned, situational awareness. We're always providing information back to the police and other people about what's going on that might be of interest to them. And so that's all part of this medical logistics communication that our team provides back to Forward Command. The pace and stress thing, I think, is unique to us. It was a device we came up with as a way to kind of contribute. But basically, we asked the medical teams to provide the data for how many people visited their medical tent from the last time. So we have the delta, the change that happened between that. So, you know, from the last time they saw 20 people, now they see 45, and we put that number into a spreadsheet and added a stress level. So then we asked the doctor, how well are you handling the 40 patients you just received? And we have a stress level that goes from 1 to 5, and that also produces a value on a screen that goes to a dashboard that the whole place can see, and how well everybody's handling the stress of the course, or how well they're handling their patients. And you'd be surprised what you'll learn from this very simple scale and this little exercise. Because if a guy puts a 5 up that flashes a red button on the screen, you got to go ask what the heck's going on there. And you'll find out that they're overwhelmed. They've run out of supplies, or they've got too many patients so they can't possibly keep up with it. And so it's a way to kind of figure out in real time, you know, how well the medical team is managing their patient load. I mentioned the two weather guys. We have these two guys basically just monitor the weather. We provide them with some of the stats, but they're also tied into the National Weather Service. So they're providing customized reports for the event. The aid stations themselves differentiate from we're the course medical tent. That's usually the first thing on an aid station. The aid stations go for almost a block. And one of their featured jobs is to provide water. And what you see here is how the water is stacked up in a tray here. They report back how much water is being used. It's a measure for them to know how well the runners are adjusting to the conditions. So they report that information back. We don't do that, but there are some people who do that, and that's one of the kind of fun things to sort of consider how they can track how well runners are hydrating as they go through this race. There are, of course, I mentioned a lot of commercial radios on the race, on the event. There's non-medical course logistics we're not necessarily involved with. But what that group does is it produces a lot of cell phones. And so there's a lot of traffic. You can't rely on cell phones to work. There's typically 1 or 2 semi-trailers staged at each aid station loaded with supplies. And a lot of stuff is pre-deployed, like I showed you the ice station machines. And for each one of those, that same setup goes to each one of the aid stations. And the emergency action signs are handled basically by these course logistics people. We serve as the emergency backup for this group. So we have a relationship with them. If for instance, there's a need to close that station, we have to work with the aid station captain to help communicate back to, whatever the desire is for us to do. So we have a role there as well, not a big role, but we have a role in that job. I think we can't talk about the marathon without talking about Boston. Boston has changed the game enormously. I've lost a lot of volunteers because of Boston. A lot of people feel that these things aren't safe anymore. It has produced enormous security concerns. As a result, most of these big races draw the government that comes down and monitors what's going on, the FBI, Secret Service, FEMA. They're all big part of the team. In fact, they've had to expand the tent by another 30 feet to make room for all these different agencies that come in. In fact, I was going to work at 4 in the morning and I saw this barrage of, there must have been 50 black SUV, FBI things all zooming down Michigan Avenue to get to Soldier Field to get in line to get ready to be deployed. Again, this is where situational awareness has played a much bigger role. Right after Boston, a couple of our guys saw some people walking around with a backpack, just like the guys were at the Boston. And we were able to tell the police about these folks, and they tracked them down. And turns out there was nothing really nefarious there, but you just never know. I mean, that's kind of what's going on now. It's our job for situational awareness is probably more critical than ever. We are now doing a lot more tabletop exercises and having special awareness training, like how do you handle, bombs, for instance. So that's part of it. The other part of the training, by the way, is we try to get people to take hands-on CPR. So if there is an issue, and I didn't bring one, shoot, what do they call it? If you have a victim from Boston, and you need to do, can't think of the name of it. Anyway, you got to stop the bleeding, a tourniquet. We all been issued a tourniquet as part of our toolkit. It's unbelievable, really. So we tell our folks, be prepared. The weather can have an impact on this. We have to dress appropriately. I mean, the weather in Chicago, like every place, changes like by the minute. And the other part of that is know where our safe havens are. Where do you go if something goes wrong? And so the marathon has done a great job of analyzing where groups of folks can go in a disaster, like weather. If they have a storm someplace and they've got to duck 30,000 or 15,000 people somewhere or 10,000 people somewhere, they've got places where that can happen. The other thing that I think is important about ham radio that a lot of people don't realize is that, we need to be self-contained. And so that's part of our message is you got to bring your own food, bring your own water. They will provide things, but generally we got to be ready to do it on our own. And then, one of our bylines is if you see something, say something. These are guys that worked the Shamrock early on. You see that they're kind of overdressed here, but the weather can change in Chicago pretty brutally. I mean, it can go it's going to be 60 tomorrow, but on Monday it's going to be 32. So that's kind of, you got to be prepared for just about anything. So before I get into that, somebody asked, one of the questions you asked is, how do you recruit this many folks? So I was the president of my radio club and I started dragging them into this thing early on. And I quickly learned that I could not get enough people to help. When we did the first year, we recruited 60 people. And that was a miracle that we could get 60 people. And we've just barely covered the bet. We only got enough to get to each one of the 8 stations. The trick, it seems, is that we've encouraged all the clubs to adopt a aid station. So that's sort of what's evolved right now. Now I think I have 14 clubs that have adopted an aid station. They recruit their own people for it. They own it. They've gotten used to doing it there. And that provides a huge, like 60% of who we need. The other 20% are new people that show up and we've got to feed them into those places to learn how to do the ropes. The hardest group to keep feeding is the folks that are on the mobile triage team. I've had the same group doing it for almost 10 years, but those guys are very special because they have to be very athletic. They've got to be good on their radio skills because they are in the heat. They're really running around picking up patients that need help. And if you ever want to listen to some interesting conversations, you need to listen to these folks trying to connect the superior people who are trying to bring more advanced medical supplies to the location where that patient is. And it can be heart-wrenching sometimes. So the trick for us has been to recruit smaller clubs and encourage them to get involved, and then keep feeding them so that they feel like they're enjoying what they're doing. But that's how we've gotten up to about 140 people. And frankly, I could use another 20. We could use 160 if we could ever get there. COVID has kicked our butt. It's been really hard. A lot of people didn't want to work the last marathon because of COVID. I think I recruited 180 people. And by the time we got to the event, 40 of them dropped out. So it was just really, really hard. And I don't know where we're going to be going on, but it's just the hardest thing is recruiting. And among other things, one of the things we do for recruiting is talks like this. It went to all the radio clubs and would talk to them. We've been hitting all the usual email chains. We're trying to hit some of the nets, but really just talking it up. We haven't done a lot of PR because the bank hasn't really encouraged us to do that. They don't want us to, outshine them. So occasionally we'll squeak out an article on ARRL because they don't even know the ARRL exists. So we kind of slip it in that way, So we start pretty darn early. These are some guys putting up antennas. Now, one of the things I was going to mention is that pay attention to the background of these photographs, because for some reason, almost all our photographs are of porta potties. I don't know why, but that's how it goes. But we start pretty early. These are guys setting up their antennas. Everybody's got a different antenna strategy. That's what's kind of fun. Everybody goes at it differently. Everyone's got a different strategy about what their go kit looks like. This is a guy that really had it together. He's got has a great go kit. I've met him on Red Cross operations, and that's kind of the fun thing is you find out there's a cadre of folks that do this that we've come to learn and learn from each other and do things together and meet each other at these kind of events. Here's a kind of a makeshift shelter for this little ham group. It kind of looks like a muskrat tent, but it breaks the wind and kept the sun out of their head a little bit. But one of the things that's fun about this is the hams tend to bring a lot of toys. This guy had a laptop, and so the laptop was providing a feed of the race. And so before the race was starting here at this particular station, which I think is 13, the medical team was watching the race evolve from the TV there. That was kind of fun. These are some of the elite runners who are starting out. These guys are pretty amazing to watch. Of course, I haven't ever seen the race because I sit in the command tent in that tent I showed you earlier, and all I see is a white wall. So I'm told there's a race that's going on outside there. So here's that porta potty shot. Every one of these shots is like this, but anyway, it's amazing how many of these shots they set themselves up in front of a porta potty. That's the way it goes. One of the features that they developed after that 1 year of really intense heat was to have these cooling pools that you see, little kiddie pools there, and these spray stations that can bring the temperature down as people are going through it, cool them down, cooling station they call them. Some of this stuff requires our involvement because in order to get the water to those hoses, sometimes we got to call the fire department and say, hey, can you fire up that hydrant that's been locked off? This is just a view of the aid station starting to accept patients. A lot of these aid stations have two tiers. They have a kind of a quick and dirty fix it up, like you see some people with little scratches and bandages that they're putting on wounds here. And then deeper in, they've got people with more serious issues being attended to. So this fast track group comes in, they get what they need, and then they pass on, and people who need more help are in the back. And that's that. This red flag pretty much starts the beginning of the aid station. The medical tent is the first thing in the aid station, and this red flag tells folks that that's where we are. That's where they are. So they can pull over. And we've had this big battle about who are we? Hams? Are we amateurs? What the heck are we anyway? One guy came up to this guy and he says, where do I get my ham? He came up to this guy and said, where's my hams at? It's a struggle because I don't think any of these terms, an amateur is an unpaid professional in a way, but we're all completely devoted to this hobby and devoted to what we can do. I mean, in the end, I think basically we're here to serve, and that's really what we do very well. And I'm very proud of what our team has done. You know, like I said, we built a culture around this now. The Marine Corps has the same kind of ethic. They've got a really incredible ethic that, you know, if you don't show up, you say you're going to show up and then you don't show up, and I've had a few of those, you're blackballed. You can't come back to the marathon again. They keep track of you folks. So, you know, it's been a fun enterprise. It's not anything that I thought I was going to be doing. Gosh, I've been doing this 15 years now. Never thought that's what I'd be doing now, but I tell you, it's been the most rewarding thing I've done in ham radio, and it's been the best colleague, a bunch of colleagues that I've met from around the country. I mean, we get people from 4 states that support the event, and it's been a lot of fun. I'm going to stop this somehow. There you go. I don't know if that was interesting. I'll be glad to take any questions. Well, thanks for the opportunity. You guys were terrific, and I'll look forward to meeting you at Field Day. Maybe I never get to California very often. I don't know why. I get to Hawaii, but California doesn't seem to work to Chicago so well. So
You fly over us.
but anyway,
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rob, for hooking me up. And wow, just